Welcome to Follow South Jersey's Follow Salem Podcast about the people, places, and everything good in and around Salem, New Jersey. Today we're talking with Majority Leader of the New Jersey General Assembly, Louis Greenwald. Assembly Leader Greenwald talks about a number of topics affecting South Jersey, including healthcare, education, housing, and the recent gun violence. Hi, welcome to Follow Salem Podcast. I'm Dean Johnson, Editor-in-Chief of Follow South Jersey, and today we're honored to have Majority Leader of the New Jersey General Assembly, Louis Greenwald from District 6. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being with us. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on in the legislature, what's happening, tell us a little about yourself. Where are you? You're from South Jersey.
Born and raised in South Jersey. I'm a husband and father of three. Three grown children now. My oldest is a brand new practicing attorney, just passed the bar.
Like father, like son.
And that's my oldest. That's my daughter. And then
like father, like daughter.
I have boy-girl twins that are 24, and my son is in his second year of medical school, and my daughter, my youngest daughter, the second twin, just graduated from Boston with her graduate degree in public health. And but I'm a proud New Jerseyan, proud member of South Jersey, born and raised here, and couldn't be happier.
Right. You did your undergrad in Bethlehem,
yes,
Pennsylvania, and you got a bachelor's in political science,
yes,
right, in government, and then you went on to law.
Yes.
Why did you go into public service? Like, was there something that happened? Maybe you were in high school or something, or somebody inspired you, like one day, or maybe not. Maybe you went into something else.
So I went to Moravian College in Bethlehem and loved it. It was a great experience. Seventh oldest college in the country, and a small school, liberal arts college. It's just wonderful, and it's just everything that I thought college would be when I drove up onto the campus. And I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I'd always wanted to be a lawyer. I had a wonderful role model when I was growing up, and I had the privilege of watching him handle a very difficult case for someone who had committed, who was a doctor. And the doctor, through an act of love, had really done what we now do through legislation, a death with dignity model for a woman who raised him. And although she wasn't his mother, she had adopted him. And the family came and said, Mom is in pain. She couldn't communicate anymore. She was in the fetal position. She wasn't eating, and they wanted her to die with dignity. Right. And he was this remarkable doctor who was this incredible servant to the people, worked with senior citizens, and ultimately was challenged with this incident. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine who was a lawyer, I watched the case, and he ended up having a 6-month suspension of his license, and his public service was to work with the underserved and the privileged and provide medicine to them. And it was really a remarkable outcome to a very human case. And it was decades ago, and it was certainly before people had these conversations. And I watched that, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And at the same time, I'd grown up in a political family, but was not really looking for a political career. Right. My mom was the first woman elected mayor of our hometown, Cherry Hill. And it was just a remarkable experience in watching her serve. And I kind of fell into this path. And then, so it wasn't something that happened when I was younger and that I wanted to do this. I was inspired by public service. My mom was my greatest role model in life. Right. But I really had sketched out my career as a young lawyer. And then in 1995, we lost my mom tragically in a car accident. Sorry to hear that. And the outpouring from the community was unbelievable. I stood at the viewing for 6 hours while 5,000 people came through to pay respects. Mm-hmm. And it just left a remarkable impression on me of the difference that she made in people's lives. Right. And the party came to me soon thereafter and said, we don't want your mother's memory to die with this accident. And they asked me to run. And I ran to kind of keep Mom's memory alive. And 30 years later, here I am. And
that's how things happen. People come up and ask you. Yeah. And suddenly you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about doing it yourself. And
I'd been asked the year before to run for the United States Congress while my mom was still alive. And I had said no. I was very, very proud of her, but was starting my career. Right. and had graduated from Seton Hall Law School in '92.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, obviously only a few short years after in '95 that this all happened, and it kind of set my career on parallel tracks.
Right. What kind of law were you?
So I started out doing products liability litigation,
Okay.
and as my career in government started to grow and the demands grew, it was getting harder and harder to do litigation,
Right.
Because of the time constraints and the impact on the courthouse. So I transformed my practice from litigation, which I loved because I loved kind of telling that story in front of an audience, a jury.
Right.
So my audience kind of became the public on the policy side,
Mm-hmm.
and I changed my practice to what it still is today, really representing startup companies, incubator companies. There are two types of clients that I look after. One is established companies that are trying to launch a new innovation,
Mm-hmm.
or startup companies that are incubating a new technology or idea.
Right. Now, is this part of that transformative solutions?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what you do with that, and what is transformative
Yeah.
solutions?
So about 13 years ago, I started my own company, and we called it Transformative Solutions because I came from the concept of what I do in every aspect of my life, whether it's personal, policy-oriented, or business, is how do we find solutions to transform people's lives for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And so we came up with the name Transformative Solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say 95% of my clients have fallen into the healthcare space.
Okay.
And what we do is really try to innovate people away from what was known as a fee for service, where if you hurt your arm and you went to the doctor and they examined you, you charged a fee for that service, to now really what I think the future is, which is a fee for value, which is to do value-based care, which is to direct patients to the lowest cost setting that increases the patient outcome, that is a better patient experience, and lowers the cost.
Interesting. All right. So, what exactly is? I think people would like to know. What is a majority leader?
I think everybody puts their own flavor on it, but I am the in New Jersey. We have 120 members of the state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
There are 80 members in the assembly where I serve and have only served, and there are 40 members in the Senate. New Jersey, unlike Pennsylvania, our legislative districts are identical. So each of the 40 districts has one senator and two assembly people representing the exact same communities.
Mm-hmm.
And in my house in the assembly, I have risen and have been the longest serving majority leader in the history of the state.
13 years?
13, going 13,
Almost
14 years, yeah.
It'll be 14 in January.
And, my responsibility is to help articulate the majority party's position, not just on the floor, but in the public in settings like this, to be able to be the voice of that party on difficult public policies, to explain what our rationale is, to help make sure that we have the votes where we can in a bipartisan fashion, but certainly to make sure that those votes are within our own caucus, to work with the governor of either party to make sure that public policy gets done, but also that gets done in a way that we believe is responsive to the constituents that we serve.
Right.
And in New Jersey, for quarter of a century, this has been what I would call a blue to purple state. And representing those interests and being able to articulate those issues in a balanced way is what I look at my role as.
Right. So, I mean, you've worked under a number of governors from both parties. We seem to be in a time in our history of America, New Jersey, there's great divisions. How are you crossing the aisle? How do you bring these two sides that seem to be so polarized together?
So it's funny. I've noticed since the horrible shooting last week with Charlie Kirk that there are a lot of people espousing what I've been saying for well over a decade, that social media, I think, is the greatest enemy right now to our democracy, and balancing its benefits under freedom of speech and making sure that it is not dividing us in real time is very true, and a real challenge that we face. When I say that it is our greatest threat, it's because it is being run by algorithms that are pointing people to what they want to hear or what their inclinations are, as opposed to having conversations like this that are driven by opinions that I think people of good intention can go in with a certain mindset, but through a conversation say, wow, I never thought of that, and change a point of view or bend or find compromise or find a solution that helps transform people's lives for the better. Right. And when we get stuck in our own thought patterns over and over and over again, and we are fed those same thought patterns over and over again, I think it retards the free thinking that is so critical to a vibrant democracy. So I'm very worried about that in the direction.
How are you bridging that gap then? And if that's happening to the common people, it's happening, at every level of government. I'm sure legislators they're watching the same memes as all of us, and they may have some effect.
So the way I try to overcome it is to not use those avenues as resources. I use them more so to understand what people's thoughts are. And then I use that as the beginning of my research to form my own opinion and to begin dialogues and conversations. The reason why I was so thankful that you asked to do this is because, and not to do it by Zoom, but to do it in person, is because I think this personal touch is critically important. And we're seeing more and more people that are alone looking at these outlets as opposed to engaging in a human interaction that is different. So what I do personally is, I challenge people to get off of what they believe are news outlets and understand that they're entertainment. I had a conversation with wonderful friends of ours who have different political opinions than ours. I would consider my wife and I and our family moderate left, and our friends are more moderate right. But when I sat down and I talked to them, and I think that's the biggest key to answer your question, is have conversations, right? But when I sat down and talked to them, and I asked, well, where do you get your news? And it was the same things that you hear all the time when you talk to students or others. Well, I watch Fox News, or I watch Newsmax, right? And to challenge people to understand that MSNBC and Fox are not news outlets; they're entertainment. Right. And I do government and politics all the time. So when I get in my car to come here today, I've got sports radio on because I enjoy sports, and that's my entertainment. Right. And when I was I've done this my whole life since I've been driving. Right. When I was a younger person and I would turn on WIP, there would be sports hosts that would incite the listeners. Yeah. And I ran into someone more as an adult, and they said, oh, so-and-so is a wonderful person. I said, oh my God, I can't stand him. It's just so angry all the time. And they said, no, it's all an act. It's all about driving, ratings and advertising. And I would just say, when you're watching a station that you think is news and an alert comes on, breaking news, but they break for a commercial, that's probably entertainment because they're holding you to come back. Right. So when I challenged my friends and they said, well, what should we watch? And I laugh out loud when I think about it and say it. And I said, well, you need to listen to NPR. You need to watch BBC. And their response was so wholesome, so innocent, and so accurate. They said, oh, my God, that's so boring. And I said, news is intended to be boring. It's not to entertain you. It is intended to give you something to think about and then break and go find your own thoughts and opinions on it. And that's the challenge we face.
So, you're saying the benefit of bringing people together, or what helps, is that conversation. Are those conversations happening between left and right at the state level?
So, I've been doing this 30 years now, and I think back over my career, and legislators from both parties that I've gotten close to have always said the same thing. Oh my God, it used to be so much better. And I think I don't want to fall into that trap, although my inclination is that it used to be better. There used to be greater civility. There used to be greater camaraderie. There's less of that.
Why?
I think because instead of folks playing to solving problems in public policy, they are playing to an electorate in a primary where a member of our party can be challenged from someone on these on propaganda and thoughts that are farther to the left. You're not left enough. And my friends in the Republican Party are challenged by this growing MAGA movement, and you're a rhino, you're a Republican in name only,
right,
where they are just, I think people in both parties are just honest, hardworking people that are trying to solve a problem, but you're almost penalized if you try to do that because you weren't right enough, or you didn't stand up to it as opposed to moving.
The word compromise seems to be turned into profanity now.
Yeah.
Is there a way back from that?
I think it happens every day. I think back to, a governor who I had many challenges with, but had tremendous respect for, in his style and his approach. But Governor Christie, the governor of New Jersey is the most powerful elected governor in the country because of the appointment power it has and by our Constitution. Mm-hmm. But he or she is one person, and as a legislative body, our 120 are equal to one. And that was one of the great debates that I would always have with Governor Christie. I have to get you as one vote, but before I get to you, I got to get 41 in the Assembly and 21 in the Senate. And that was about the compromise. But I remember, before Bridgegate, Governor Christie was really chastised by his own party for reaching across the aisle and working in a bipartisan fashion with us after Superstorm Sandy, and in an emotional event that New Jersey had not seen in our lifetime, hugging the President Obama down at the Jersey Shore, which to this day, I have pictures in my phone of how that area was ravaged. It looked like a movie scene.
Yeah.
And, I toured that area afterwards, and I applaud Governor Christie for working and putting politics aside to help solve that problem. And that led to other great public policies that we did, like police reform in Camden City, urban redevelopment, and business development grants that have led to that city having a remarkable financial turnaround today. News about one of the first cities in the country in the utilization of drones, the fight crime, all began in a bipartisan effort with Governor Christie, where I proudly, being in the middle of that, stood on a dais with President Obama and Governor Christie. And it was a few years after 60 Minutes had called Camden the highest crime city in the country, to President Obama standing there in a bipartisan way with all of us saying Camden is the national model of urban redevelopment. Right. And that's something that I don't care what party you're from, you should take pride in.
Right.
So
you mentioned earlier, the tragedy of Charlie Kirk in Utah. Last week also had a school shooting in Colorado. Right here in South Jersey, a driver was shot in a road rage incident that put Stockton University on lockdown. What measures do you believe that are necessary to reduce this crime or this gun violence that we've been seeing?
So New Jersey's had a very successful record, I think, compared to other states in the country, and we are known for having some of the most strict gun laws in the country. And I'm a believer, and I have become nationally known, I think, as a legislator who has spearheaded gun violence prevention legislation. So I think it's ironic when people hear me say that, and also at the same time say, I am an avid supporter of the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. And I believe that people should own a gun if they choose to and understand the responsibilities if you want to have a gun in your home to protect yourself. My wife grew up very near here in Bridgeton, was a farm girl from Rosenhain. And if you owned a farm, you had guns to protect your crops. And, my family was no different in that regard. If you want to be a sportsman and you're an avid hunter, I see no problem with that. But those guns are very different than the weapons, military-style weapons that we see out in the public and that are being sold, where we have more guns on these streets throughout the country than we do people. And I had a conversation with a client of mine who's become a friend, and he called me after the incident in Utah and how tragic it was. And he's more right. And he said, Lou, I just don't understand this. He said, why? why is this happening and why is it not happening anywhere else in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, I said, Chris, it's nowhere else in the world do they sell these weapons of mass destruction and at the level and with the ease that we do in America.
Right.
And I said, and look, it is more than that. And he has a remarkable background, has built a remarkable company and innovation in behavioral health services and reaching out in particular to kids. So there is a piece of this that we need to do more on the mental health and to connect to people, and where our conversation started about, I think, social media and what's driving, and hold these social media outlets responsible for some of the information that's being put out there. But at the same time, the sheer amount of guns that are on the streets are a challenge. Now in New Jersey, we've done very thoughtful legislation. When one of my saddest and proudest, most remarkable moments was when I met with the parents of the victims of Sandy Hook, when certain social media outlets were calling these folks actors, right, and portraying that these children's lives were not lost, which disgusts me. That people still believe that. And those people that believe that in many respects are innocent. They have been, through propaganda and other means, led to believe this. But if you held the hands of these parents, if they shed tears with you in your office, you would never walk away and say that this was an act. It's cruel to even utter those words. Right. But when they walked away, they looked at me and they said, Lou, if there's one thing you could do, the greatest thing that would have the greatest impact is limit magazine capacity to 10 rounds. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think about that doesn't take a single gun away from a single owner. All it says is that you got to reload after 10 rounds. Right. And, if you're a sportsman and you're shooting at a target, is it that inconvenient to reload after 10 rounds, right? If you have a weapon like that in your home, they're protect you. If you haven't hit them with the first 10 shots, right, like, there's a bigger problem.
You introduced that legislation.
Yes.
And that passed.
Yes.
Okay. And when did that pass?
I would say 8 or 9 years ago. Okay. So that's been significant. The red flag laws is the one piece of legislation which identifies a person in distress through a family member or neighbor and allows police to interject themselves, and again temporarily will take a weapon away from someone until they can get clearance from a doctor. Sometimes it just helps someone who needs medication or is off their medication or needs some kind of counseling to get back. Right. But it walks that line of protecting the Second Amendment. That legislation is one area where there became a national model and bipartisan support that other states and the federal government actually took up. Right. So, that gives me hope that some of this can happen. But the one thing that concerns me and that I've seen, I think New Jersey is going to regress in spite of our progressive laws in this area, is the Supreme Court decision that has overrun state laws in this area, which is allowing people in every state to carry a weapon as part of their Second Amendment rights. I as a lawyer, I have respect for those decisions. I disagree with it vehemently. I think it is not an interpretation of what the founders of this country and the drafters of our documents that our country is based on intended when these words were written. There was a time we had come out of a civil war where we had to bear arms to protect our way of life. That's not where we are today.
Right. So a couple things. I think mental health we'll get to. Social media, you've brought that up a few times. Should social media be regulated?
Yes.
How so? And how does that border on getting rid of someone's free speech?
So we regulate major broadcasting industries now. Like when we came up as kids, movies were rated G, PG, R, right, X, right? Right. It was a regulated industry which was designed to give people and families a code as to where they felt their family and their children were in their development and what movies they wanted to see. Right. It was a personal choice, but it was regulated, and it gave you an indicator as to where you should go. We regulate through the Food and Drug Administration, food, content, calories, information that is on that food. I don't know. We do all of those things because we regulate prescription medications. We do all of those things for the health and well-being of our citizens.
Right.
This outlet, which can do tremendous good, should be regulated so that people know, with disclaimers, what they are watching and whether it's entertainment or whether it's been fact-checked or based. And I believe there should be oversight over this because of what we are seeing now with the growth and the perpetuation of this. And now I think people from all parties starting to raise concerns. I think it is at a time where it needs to be regulated.
Who does the regulation?
So I think, when you build public policy, I think these are the exact questions as you're trying to find compromise and solutions. These are the exact questions that we would ask. So, but I would think, because in my humble opinion, these outlets are not bounded by state lines, that this is a national initiative that would be set out and allow states to almost piggyback on to those regulations.
Interesting. So healthcare. We mentioned mental health. Now, mental health access to mental health care has been an issue, especially since the pandemic. It seems to be increasing. How has the state invested in mental health and behavioral health issues and services?
So throughout my career, both in my policy life and in my private life as an attorney working with healthcare providers, I would say that mental health has faced a ongoing challenge of almost a second-tier version of overall healthcare. People looked at the healthy body, healthy mind, as opposed to what I think people have now come to understand, that a healthy mind and healthy body go hand in hand. And you can't treat one without the other. And, I do try to look back at the, just the horrible nature of the pandemic and find silver linings. And I think one of the silver linings that came from it was people having a better understanding of how events in your life could impact your mental well-being, and that could ultimately impact your physical well-being. So one of the things that we learned from the pandemic that we experimented in that had existed prior to was telemedicine. And one area where telemedicine, in my opinion, has been highly effective is in the area of mental health and mental health treatment. It has shown tremendous benefits of maintaining appointment schedules. Patients are more inclined to keep their appointment, which allows them, if they need medication, to stay on medication, to have an outreach to a provider at a more easily accessible opportunity than having to have to go into an appointment. It has allowed the providers to serve more patients. It has led us to other public policy. So one of the major initiatives of the state was to continue with telemedicine after the pandemic. The second was because we have a shortage of behavioral health specialists up and down the spectrum of care providers, to do reciprocity with other states of providers in good standing because of the access by telemedicine. A doctor in Delaware, New York, or Connecticut can just as easily serve a patient in New Jersey and vice versa. So those are tremendous areas that we have looked at. And then one of the things that I would like to start to address in lame duck, which is the final months of this legislative session for your listeners, and then with the new administration of whichever party wins in November, would be increasing Medicaid funding in New Jersey to increase rates for providers that are providing services in behavioral and mental health, primary care, maternal and infant mortality, and pediatric specialty care. And that last one is because we, in spite of healthcare being one of our largest providers in the state, we have an out-migration of families and patients to Pennsylvania and Delaware because we do not have, especially in the southern part of the state, a pediatric specialty hospital like CHOP or New Moores Children's Hospital in our state. So when our families, including my own, had a child that was in distress and needed help, we started at home, but ultimately had to migrate over.
Yes, as did
And that should never be the case in a state like New Jersey.
How do we work with healthcare access for underserved communities? A lot of the communities with, you have the sniffles or the flu, they're going to emergency rooms. What can be done through legislation to help them have the access to more healthcare? So
one of the early pieces of legislation I did was the first national Medicaid ACO in the country, first national Medicaid affordable care organization in the country, ACO. And it was done with a wonderful leader by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Brenner, who piloted this program in Camden and is now run by a remarkable woman by the name of Kathleen Noonan. And that program was exactly what you're talking about, which was to get the patients with primary care in the community where they live, because that population, more often than not, because of a lack of access to primary care doctors and pediatricians, was showing up in emergency rooms with illnesses that had progressed because they hadn't been taken care of earlier. So again, think back at the beginning of our conversation. Value-based care. Get to a patient at a better setting, lower cost setting with a better patient outcome, better patient experience that saves money.
Right.
In the first quarter that we launched that program, it saved emergency room visits in Cooper Hospital over $400 million in the first quarter of the year. That then became a national model that, in a bipartisan fashion, Governor Christie actually made a platform of his presidential run in the Republican primary. When it came out originally, members of the Republican Party tried to lambaste it as Obamacare. And as I said to the folks at the time in the debate, I was chairing the Budget Committee, that program was a solution to a decades-old problem without spending a dollar of taxpayers' money to do just what we said, serve patients where they should be. Programs like that has now expanded to 5 counties in the state and is a national model. I am looking to continue to invest in federally qualified health centers, some right down the street from here, some of the best in the state right down the street from where we're doing this discussion. And that is about primary care in the community getting to people. All of that being said, for the poorest of our residents, we continue to face one significant barrier, more so in the South than anywhere else, which is access to public transportation to get access to that care.
Yeah. So what are we doing about it? Especially this area right here, Salem County, Cumberland County, access to public transportation is difficult. You have people who live here in Salem who can't get to the nearest grocery store or a supermarket.
Which is about health care. Because if you don't have good nutrition, you don't have good health.
Right, exactly. So what can the state do to help?
So I've been on this street and with you now for about an hour and 15 minutes. And it is not lost on me that not a single NJ Transit bus has gone by.
Right.
And that's a problem. And so one of the things that I'm very proud to say that Governor Murphy listened to and just launched with the help from leadership from our business community and the president of the South Jersey Chamber, Christina Renna, we went on a public policy initiative to build what is called an EDS and MEDS corridor of transportation. So working with Chris Calori, Secretary of Transit for New Jersey, we are building out now in the next few months that exact corridor that will connect hospitals and educational facilities to the community with round-trip transportation in a metro transit system that will be spearheaded by Mr. Calori with the design and development from the leaders of those institutions. So every area of this southern part of the state will be connected. So if you're at Inspira Hospital in Cumberland or Gloucester County and serving Salem County, there will be transportation that will pick you up and take you to those facilities. But they will also be able to commute people for access to employment to these different areas and get you close enough to the supermarkets as well. And we came upon this because in the discussion around the corporate business transit fee that Governor wanted to introduce a couple years ago, those of us in South Jersey, myself at the head of the leadership group, said, Governor, New Jersey Transit is horribly broken. You have identified a significant problem in this state. Mm-hmm. But you're going to ask our residents to pay a tax that we get no benefit from. And he heard us. And 18 months later, he worked with us to come together with this solution. So this will be launching in the next few months. It'll be ready to hit January 26th. But in that debate around the transit fee, which is why our model is about how do you find problems and then identify solutions. When I was meeting with the leadership at Inspira Hospital, they shared with me that their closest transit stop to the Inspira emergency room was a 20 to 30 minute walk. And I kept thinking back to when my wife and I were pregnant with the twins, mm-hmm. and she went on bed rest at about 6 months. And I always relate public policy back to my personal life and try to govern through life experience. And I thought to myself, wow, if we didn't have access to transportation, if we had to use public transportation, how would I have kept her healthy, right. And how would I have gotten the babies here healthy? Right. And that, to me, that's how you find solutions.
Yeah. And just a side note, this is a stop right here. This is a New Jersey Transit stop. Yeah.
And am I right? I mean, unless I missed it, no one has come by.
I don't think we did. Well, we can look at the tape later, but I don't think we did. So, eds and meds. So let's talk about education a little bit. So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing public education in New Jersey? Funding, staffing, we're hearing about teacher shortages.
Yep. So I want to be careful with how we answer that because we have 3 years in a row the number one public education system in the country. And I think we should be proud of that. And that is a byproduct of our investment,
right,
which is at record levels in New Jersey. But I don't want people to mistake that for mission accomplished, all good. I think areas like education are ever evolving and ongoing. But I think some of the problems that you just alluded to, teacher shortages,
funding for underserved communities. You have some communities who have a good, strong tax base. You have other communities, like Salem, that have a much smaller tax base.
So that's exactly where I was going, which is that places the burden on what I believe to be a broken tax structure in New Jersey that over-relies on the most discriminatory tax that New Jersey has, which is property taxes. Mm-hmm. And you're never going to have an equal education system in every community throughout the state, in any state. But what you want is access and opportunity to have that balance. Mm-hmm. And I think the over-reliance on property taxes, New Jersey is the only state in the country that solely funds all of local government through property taxes. No other state in the country does that. And I'm curious in watching the gubernatorial race, the Republican candidate, of all the states he could have picked, he's referenced Tennessee as a state to mirror our tax policy over, and that would be one of the last states that I would pick. Not because.
Why is that?
Well, they're 36th in the country in education and funding, and they are, I think, one of the 5 worst when it comes to health care and funding. Mm-hmm. And I just think what I have done and what I've tried to mirror our policies off of is the number one state when people leave New Jersey to relocate to is not Florida, it's not Delaware, as people think is tax-free.
Right.
It's Pennsylvania. And that if I was going to mirror a state of what we would want to mirror taxes over, that would be one of the states that I would look to. And there would be challenges with that. And it's politically difficult because people would not look at what you're lowering, but they would victimize what you're raising, mm-hmm. and not look at that as what would be balanced. And not everything about Pennsylvania is perfect either. And my friends that moved to Pennsylvania, after a few years, when they call them, you know what they complain about? Their taxes, right? So I don't care where you are, people are going to complain about taxes.
Right.
But I think finding areas to get off of the reliance of property taxes, mm-hmm. as the sole source, I think would be very powerful and give people greater stability. And when you see the investment that we've made in the last few years in restoring programs that were cut by Governor Christie in the last Republican administration, where they eliminated the rebate programs. We're at record levels with the Anchor program up to $1,500 checks,
right,
where they scaled back senior freeze, and we've increased income eligibility up to $162,500. If you can make $162,000 retirement income, that's a healthy retirement income.
Mm-hmm.
You can have your property taxes frozen at their current levels. And now with the Stay in J program, which is giving people up to 50% property tax checks back, up to 50% of $13,000 in property taxes, where the average property tax in New Jersey today is about $9,800. That is having people stay in New Jersey, and it is having a dramatic impact. And this is where elections matter. The last administration cut those programs, and right now, the Republican candidate is talking about increasing the sales tax to 10%, mm-hmm. and that's so that they can cut income tax and corporate business tax, which to me has not been the driving force of people leaving the state. It has been about property taxes.
Right. How about higher education? New Jersey has some of the highest tuition costs in the nation. What can we do to bring that into a more affordable for working class families?
So I'm one of the first in my family to get a higher education degree, and certainly to go to graduate school. When I went, there was an access problem. There weren't enough slots. So I ended up going out of state, mm-hmm. and my career I've been. I think anybody would be envious to have the career that I had, and it is all because of my education. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that could I have gone to a state school, I would have saved a tremendous amount of money in student loans. I had to work my way through college, and added a tremendous amount of debt to me personally when I went to law school. It is the best investment I ever made. And it has allowed me to have the life that I have for myself and my family, and the educational opportunities that I've been able to give to my children. Mm-hmm. So I think that access is critically important. Education, higher education, is a victim of its own success in New Jersey, because the cost of that tuition, as high as it may be, at $33,000 or $37,000, is far less than what it costs to go out of state, right, and receive an equivalent education. Mm-hmm. And so when we're making those difficult decisions in the budget process as to funding healthcare, Medicaid, programs that have been cut by the federal government, education funding, the rebate programs and property tax relief programs, education ends up still being the best deal in town, and that's been the challenge. So I think figuring out a couple of things with the leaders in higher ed, some of which would be, how do we encourage and accept more students like myself to stay in New Jersey as opposed to when I was in that age group and left?
Right.
What opportunities can we create and give? And how do we increase access for that? Right now, access, some of them tell me, is not as big a deal, but they're still receiving thousands of applications over what the admissible seats that they have.
Right.
Investing in these campuses, in particular in the South. Rowan and the leadership under Rowan has done a remarkable job at growing that campus and doing entrepreneurial measures to invest in the campus and grow it, whether it's been the business school, the engineering school, and now most recently the veterinarian school, which I was very proud to work on with them and my friend Steve Sweeney before he left the legislature, and continue that fight since. It is the only veterinary school in the state, mm-hmm. and it is keeping our residents here in good paying jobs. Right. So but that's very expensive. You're talking tens of millions of dollars of state investment for 100 seats. And you have to look at the return on investment.
Okay. Housing is an issue, especially here in Salem. We have blight, we have issues. What role should the state play in incentivizing or regulating development, especially in urban centers like Salem, like Bridgeton, like Camden?
Yeah. So the state. I love the state. I think I am New Jersey's number one cheerleader. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I just absolutely love the state. I will never leave here. I want my children to be here and raise their families here. Access to housing for that next generation does not exist right now. Mm-hmm. When I came out of law school in 1992, and the housing market that they were building in the 1980s, 1 out of every 4 homes were 1 or 2 bedroom housing opportunities. Today it's 5%. 5%. So if you're my daughter who's starting her career as a young attorney, she doesn't need a 4-bedroom home. But if you can't get access to a 1 or 2 bedroom home, you end up living with other young professionals, or God forbid, with me. Yes, right. And I love my children, but I want to love them from a distance.
Yeah.
And the reality is that that's a challenge mm-hmm. for young people. So we have worked on what I think are smart housing policies, but the challenge is, and this is a challenge that I'm willing to take on, is it butts against the head of this tradition in New Jersey of home rule, mm-hmm. where each community wants to decide for themselves what the culture and what the framework should be. I think there needs to be a marriage of state involvement in that, in preserving and protecting our geographical,
what does that
cultural.
Look like?
I think we have to have regional development plans, not just one statewide plan. Because I think the difference from North Jersey to Central Jersey to South Jersey to our shore communities to our agricultural communities are different. Mm-hmm. But each of them need to take on a responsibility for housing. And I think it can look different in each community. One of the pieces of legislation that we worked on, and as I look up and down this Main Street, like I am a Main Street America guy. I love just walking up and down the street. Mm-hmm. But there are vacant buildings that are opportunities for mixed-use development that would bring housing on the top floor and retail on the bottom floor.
Right.
Communities fight that every day. Well, young families are going to move into that apartment up there or that condo or that townhome, and that's going to bring more kids to our schools, and more kids to our schools mean what? More property taxes.
Right.
So it's this horrible death spiral that the fear of the property tax crisis, which is why I really think that we need a future governor that's going to take this on, and this over-reliance on property taxes, because we are continuing to spiral away out of the fear of children and who are our greatest asset, and those children end up meaning higher property taxes. So that's one area. The other thing that we've invested in and looked at is the development of these subunits where you can build an in-law suite on the back of your property and create a rental opportunity, and it uses the existing infrastructure, so it mm-hmm. ties to your sewer and water lines without creating an additional burden and increased taxes to build those out. So I think we have to be creative about that. And I always come back to the consumers will tell you what they want. Our generation, I wanted to have a home. I wanted to have I wanted to have a yard.
Right.
Like that was important to me. Mm-hmm. My children's generation is different, and we have to respect that. They create the opportunity for us to redevelop communities like Patterson and Camden and Trenton and Atlantic City. Hoboken to me stands as one of the most remarkable redevelopment projects in our state.
Right. And
over the last 50 years, what that has become. Mm-hmm. And young people, our children's generation, are drawn to that. And that's okay. But you have to try to create and build and incentivize that type of development to create the housing, and not just say to people, well, we're going to have 4 and 5 bedroom homes and that's it.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I have 5 children about the same ages as yours, yep. And I'm seeing that. They don't want the 3-bedroom house with 1 bath or 2 baths and the yard, and it's something else.
And Dean, they don't want that yet, and that's okay. Like I didn't start this is my second home. My first home was a starter home.
Yeah, ours was a condo. Though,
yeah.
And then we had that. So we're talking about. I'm just going to have a few more questions because I know we're running out of time. How media is getting a bad rap. I've seen memes that saying media is the enemy. Yeah. How important is local media to the community? And what's the role of that? What should be the role of media in the community?
I think media is the backbone of a civilized society. I think it is the hallmark of our First Amendment rights. I think it is a balance of journalistic integrity and truth that the public can rely on. When people say that, I wonder if it comes back to the earlier part of our conversation, are they confused about what they interpret media to be through no fault of their own? Because they're being misled to believe that something that shows up on their TikTok is news, or it's factual, or it's been fact-checked, or that a journalist who would have to get 2 references before they could put it into print.
Right.
Someone just has an idea and they put it out there and make it look very professional. And I think that's hurting your industry. The access to the ability to fund media where these other outlets are being flush with capital from sponsors and advertisers, is very difficult to compete with, which is why one of the policy initiatives that we sponsored was for the government to put millions of dollars into supporting local media outlets that are, based in the tradition and the training of true journalism and the foster true news. And I think that's the Civic Consortium that is now a number of years in the making, and one of the things I'm probably most proud of in my career.
And that's actually, I was about to ask you, of your 30-plus year career, what are you most proud of? And it's allowing media to be funded, the funding of...
Yeah, because, I think back, Dean, to when Superstorm Sandy hit, we were getting our news from how South Jersey communities were doing from the mayor of Philadelphia. Think about that. Right? Because even back then, it had started to erode into media outlets. I'm asked quite often to go and do interviews with stations in New Jersey. And, I'll go. But I always ask them, so when will you be airing in my communities? Oh, well, we don't air down there. Right? Okay. So that my residents are being denied that access. So those are challenges that we face. But even more so, without the investment in that, the other great public policy initiatives that we've done, whether it's building a cancer center, the work at the development of the veterinary school at Rowan, the Eds and Meds corridor, I'll come back in that in a second. Nobody hears about them or knows they exist. We're going to build this metro line for Eds and Meds. Well, how are we going to notify people that it exists? How are we going to get it out there? Influencers aren't going to come and volunteer to put that out. And by the way, it's kind of boring until you need it, right? But getting that information out is critically important, and that's why the investment in this is so crucial.
Right. So where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Are you looking for possibly running for a national office, retiring on an island somewhere?
Well, New Jersey's not an island, so I'm going to be retiring here. I think the one thing I've learned, I've been asked a number of times to run for Congress, and I'm not at a point in my career where I've wanted to do that. I've rejected it each time because I am as frustrated as every other citizen and resident that I know of the dysfunction and just the logjam that exists in Washington.
Right.
We're getting more done in state legislature. I actually think in the next decade, the influence of state legislators around the country are going to be far more powerful than congressional delegations because they're going to be getting things done for people in a real way. And, when you see the cuts that have come out of Washington and, I'm embarrassed to even use the phrase big, beautiful bill. It doesn't seem to rival the New Deal and the Great Society in this ridiculous bill. Mm-hmm. But when those cuts come into play, they turn to folks in every state to solve these problems. Right. And I think that's why, at the end of the day, people gravitate towards those that are helping them have a better life. And I think that's going to empower state legislators. The one thing I've learned in government is I just want to make a difference. I want to be a difference maker. I want to solve problems. my personal drive, my ambition in my private life and my personal life, hard work, talent, dedication has always paid off. There are outside influences as to where you will be and what you can do. And that's why, to me, the most important thing isn't a title that I'm going to have, but having a seat at the table and being respected by those other people at the table to say, we got a problem, let's call Lou. And what's Lou think about this? And I can honestly say that from governors of both parties, chiefs of staff, attorney generals, other legislators, I've been a constant, and I've been at the table to help solve those problems. In the next, certainly for the next 5 years or so, I'd like to continue to have that seat. And I would say in the next 10 years, I'm 58. I think I'm a young 58. I think in the next 10 years, I don't know what side of the table I'm going to be on, but I'd like to be at that table. I'd like to continue to be influencing public policy, either on the public side or the private side, and be making a difference.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Just a couple of very last quick questions. What are you reading right now?
So I'm a big Mitch Albom fan. I don't know if you've read any of his books. One of my favorite books is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. I've not kept up with, I think, his most recent ones. So they're quick reads, they're easy reads, they're passionate reads, they're emotional reads.
Right.
And I think they connect me very much to my experiences in life where, I've had loss, and having the connectivity with those people and hoping that somehow they're still involved in seeing what we're doing, because they had such an influence on me.
Right. TV shows.
Well, right now I'm all into the end of the Phillies season. So every night I'm watching the Phillies and hoping to win the division tonight.
Takes one game.
It takes one game,
and against LA would make it even better. So.
Yeah, and so we're big sports fans. So obviously we're what you call 4 for 4 down here. Mm-hmm. So. Watching the Eagles, which I think is the glory days of what we've been doing.
I have more gray now from yesterday.
Yes. So those are entertainment sports that we watch. We just watched a fun little series called Sticks with Owen Wilson, which was great.
Yeah, he's a golf instructor.
Yeah. That was fun. And I did not watch in real time, but have gotten hooked on the Dexter series, and am now watching Dexter Resurrection.
Yeah.
So
my wife and I just finished it. So
yeah, so it's a lot
of fun.
Yeah.
Music, bands.
I'm old school. I'm a Doobie Brothers, Jimmy Buffett,
Which
Joe
they're
Cocker.
But the band is touring with.
So I would love to see the Doobie Brothers in concert, and I did see that they're touring. So,
lastly, what's a perfect day off for Louis Greenwald?
Perfect day off for me is having my children around me. Either my wife, gorging us with one of her remarkable meals, or us going to dinner together,
right.
And just spending time with my kids and my family. That's the perfect day off.
Perfect. Thank you very much for spending time with us and for all your insight and information that you shared with us.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. We've been talking with Majority Leader of the New Jersey General Assembly, Louis Greenwald. For Follow South Jersey, I am Dean Johnson. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening.